This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. Policing has never been an easy challenge, and it's made more complex these days for a lot of interesting reasons. First of all, there are a lot more people. We have a more diverse population. We have people who've come here from other countries that have a totally different sort of social mindset. We also have more gangs, I think. Our guest may disagree with me, I don't know. And we have, of course, the streets, unfortunately, filled with mental patients and with people who are addicted, and also thousands and thousands of citizens who are walking around on psychotropic prescribed pharmaceuticals. On top of all that, we have a kind of entitled citizenry where nobody plays by the rules. I'm talking about motorists, pedestrians, and cyclists. Our guest is Jim Cressford. He is the police chief for Delta. Jim, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
And thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's start with this. My son and I are always talking about how nobody plays by the rules. Is that an increasing issue? Because that's our perception, that all drivers are crazy, all cyclists are crazy, and all pedestrians are crazy. And nobody wants to stop at the stop sign. Nobody wants to, everybody does a U-turn where it says no U-turn.
It's not that bad.
It's not?
It's not that bad. So
Good.
Some of our drivers have problems, clearly. And of course, one of the big problems we have with driving now is distracted driving. And that's a leading cause of serious injury in fatal motor vehicle accidents.
How do you view what I saw on the way over here? Guy with two kids in the back, everybody's seat belted, it's all kosher, but he's got his cell phone up on a little stand, and while we're, slowed in traffic, he's mucking about with his cell phone.
Totally unacceptable and distracted. That's contrary to the motor vehicle act.
And he would say, "What are you talking about, officer? We're sitting here. We're not moving."
I know. I stopped. I followed a young woman who was weaving all over the road. I initially thought that she was impaired, and so I pulled her over. And as I walked up, she had her cell phone in her hand. And so I realized then quickly she was distracted by using her cell phone. And I walked up to her and I said, it's against the law to use your cell phone when you're driving. And she said, I wasn't talking on my phone, I was texting. I said,
thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, but you're distracted. And I almost prefer that they were talking rather than texting.
People have crashed planes texting.
Unbelievable. Yeah. But she didn't know. She said, I didn't know it was against the law.
You don't get this sense that we have that so many people are they're not interested in the rules. Red lights don't mean a lot to them. Lots of things don't mean a lot to them. I drive to Horseshoe Bay every Tuesday to do a piece of work, and they've had for months, you got to slow down to 60. So I slow down to 60. People are zipping by me at warp speed.
Oh, they'll do that. They'll do that. And to be honest, we talk about what are the main issues in our communities as far as policing is concerned.
Please.
In Delta, if you did a survey, and in a lot of other communities, you say, what's the number one issue for policing?
Yes.
People would tell you traffic. We're concerned about vehicle speeding in our communities, vehicle speeding in our school zones, and distracted driving.
But that's people, but that's not your perception.
That's not our perception, no.
What's your perception for the main issue?
Well, the main issue right now for policing, and it's interesting how policing has changed over the years, but one of the big focuses in policing right now is mental health.
Yeah.
Mental health issues are consuming a large amount of our time. Some police departments are, we're hearing anywhere from 20 to 30% of the calls for service in police organizations are committed to mental health issues.
Here's the former Supreme Court Justice Frank Iacobucci.
Yes.
200-page report, 84 recommendations. This is just for the Toronto Police Force. And he says, look, the cop is the new social worker. That, he says, get used to it. That's the reality. Suck it up and do something. Because there just aren't enough social workers or psychiatrists out on the street to meet the number of... What did you say before we went on there? 25% of your calls?
Well, 25, anywhere between, depending on what department you're
Yes.
talking to, anywhere between 20 and 30% of our calls for service are mental health related.
Like, for example?
The
family
attempted
dispute?
suicide,
Oh,
family disputes, overdoses.
Yeah.
We in Delta probably commit, I would suggest anywhere between 2 and 3 people a day under Section 28 of the Mental Health Act.
Yes.
These are people who are in a position where they're about to harm themselves or to harm others. And we're
When you say commit, you commit them to where?
We'd arrest them under the Mental Health Act. We'd take them to Surrey Memorial Hospital,
Yes.
and we'd have them examined by a psychiatrist who then would make a determination whether they need help.
So when I reached out to you about 4 or 5 weeks ago,
Yes.
Chief, and asked you to join us, my thinking was about this whole ugly encounter that keeps happening over and over again, because we have too many reports in the press about people being shot or badly injured and so on. And my concern, my thinking was about the training. And I'm interested to hear, because Jim Chu, for example, says publicly, only yesterday in the press, he said, we have the best training for officers in Canada right here in Vancouver. I'm interested in how officers are taught to de-escalate, to not get, you know, you got some guy ranting and raving, he's swearing and he's, you know, frothing at the mouth and carrying on. How do you not take on his energy?
It's difficult. It's such a broad topic of discussion.
Yeah.
If I could say just a couple of things.
Please.
One is that we talk about the bad situations, the bad things that happen, the tragic situations where police encounter go very bad with serious injury or death. I can tell you that our police officers are dealing with thousands and thousands of encounters with people with various issues, and many of those mental health issues, and we never hear about the good things that the
Chu
police are
says
doing.
minimum 8 a day. Minimum.
At least.
Yes.
And so these thousands of contacts, we only read about the ones that go terribly wrong.
Yes, of course.
Or they're terribly difficult, terribly tragic.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we had a couple of high-profile.
Absolutely. And those are sad. Those are sad. There's a lot. Our police officers, they're trained well. The selection process for police is incredible nowadays, but they do a really, really good job of it.
There are psych tests, yes, for admission.
To get into policing is really difficult now. I mean, if there's so many hoops they go through. They have to write a written examination. They then have to do a medical, a physical. They have to do a lifestyles questionnaire. Then they do a polygraph. Then they do what we call an assessment center, where they're going there watched for a couple of days, and they're watched working in a group setting and see how they think, if they're too aggressive, if they're...
I'm just making this up, but do you have a category for disqualification that you call Rambo? I mean, do you have this kind of personality that shows up, who applies, and you put them through a battery of exercises and tests, and you just discover... Yes?
Oh, clearly.
This is the guy who wants to put on war paint.
Those are the guys, those are the people that we don't want in policing. That's the reason we go through all of these hoops. Then there's the psychological testing. So we do all of that with our people. Most of our police officers, well, all of our police officers in all departments have at least 2 years post-secondary. Most of them have got university degrees. So these are intelligent people. I don't say this with any disrespect to anyone, but these are the best of the best. Okay. And I don't know of any other profession, including judges, teachers, lawyers, newspaper media people, who have to go through the hoops that the police have to go through just to become a police officer.
This might be a sign of my own emotional immaturity, but I think it plays into this. Once I played an FBI agent in a TV series, and I was perfectly fine until the moment the gun wrangler came up and said, Mr. Berner, take off your jacket, and he put this leather holster, and he showed me this, I don't even remember what it was, but it was a very serious, real gun, and he showed me how it worked, showed me 5 times it was empty, put it in my holster for me, and so on. And there was a crowd around us, because we were right out on Beatty Street. I had this overwhelming sense of power, and I just wanted to go and arrest people. You know, this psychological thing. Do you get... I mean, how can you put on the uniform like this? You look great, and not have this sense of, I've got a lot of power.
Thank you for the looking great. Nobody's ever said that.
Well,
to
you
me.
do. You
Nobody's
look
ever
great.
said that
You
to me
look great.
before, so I take the compliment. That's great. Thank you. Well, I guess for me, I've been doing it for so long that it's just part of my
It's who you are,
kind of thing.
and you have it in proportion. But what about a youngster who's 25?
That's the reason we put them through all of these different hoops, if you will. The psychological testing, the assessment center. They work in a group at the in an assessment center at the Justice Institute, and they're monitored by camera, and we watch them very closely.
Yes. Okay. So Chu also says in the piece this morning in this morning's paper or was it yesterday, that they have phenomenal training, Vancouver police officers. Would you say the same for your Delta guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For the most part, our training for municipal departments in British Columbia is pretty similar.
Okay.
It's pretty much the same. The recent report the report that was released yesterday by the Canadian Mental Health and by Dr. Terry Coleman talked about the fact that British Columbia are at the cutting edge or the leading edge of training for police officers in Canada.
That's what I saw.
And they talked about all of the programs that we're doing here. And one of the things, one of the interesting things that they do for the recruits is when they're in training, they deal with the mental health issues and they talk about how we interact with people with mental health issues. They'll also bring in people with mental health issues and their families, and they'll actually do case studies with these people, and they'll work with them to see what it's like for them to have, how they respond to the police, and they can have that discussion. Great training.
Jim, that doctors have this mantra that comes before anything, and that is do no harm, right? I'm wondering if police have that kind of mantra. Are police taught, look, this is dangerous, it's tricky, it's interesting, you got to be on your toes, but one of the rules when you step out each day is, of course, do your best for the community, but do no harm. Bottom line is do no harm. So it's a tricky one when someone's out of control in public, right? So you got to protect the community, but also this is just a poor sap who's out of control and almost should be blameless. They're just freaking out.
Yeah, and you say that, I need to say, and I say this, I don't want to sound like I'm being defensive here for the police.
No, don't be defensive.
We make mistakes, clearly.
No, and argue with me if you want to.
I get that. Yeah. But our police officers, I see them every day when they go out in the morning. I see them when they come in at night, when they go out at night. Yeah. They're not going out in the street to hurt someone. Yes. They're actually going out in the street to make a difference and want to help someone.
No, I appreciate that.
I've worked with a lot of police officers who have been involved with serious encounters and with police officers who would actually kill people with interactions. It's a very difficult time for them.
Hey, look, I had a wonderful meeting once with Tom Flanagan, who was then the Ottawa police chief back in the late 80s. A delightful guy. And I asked him if he'd ever had to use his gun or no, never. He was lucky.
Yes,
he came close, but he was lucky. He did good police work, and he rose to being chief. So my guess is it wasn't just sheer luck, but Flanagan probably, like a lot of good police officers, knew how to cool the jets.
That is true. And we teach them conflict resolution. We teach them de-escalation techniques. Yes. We talk to them when we're teaching them use of force. We talk to them about what we call verbal judo, and that you learn how to talk to people, and we don't need to use physical force. We can actually use communication to actually take control and manage the situation. And as I say, thousands and thousands of times we do a real good job with that. Unfortunately, sometimes things go terribly wrong, and then we have a problem.
Do your officers go to refresher courses every 2 or 3 years?
Yes, well, we do. Yeah. We do ongoing training in the Delta Police. We all do. There's always training, constant training. We have mandatory training that we have to take. Domestic violence is mandatory. I think we're going to be seeing mental health de-escalation is going to be mandatory. There's a lot of mandatory training.
By the way, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it suddenly occurred to me when you were talking about this. 8-year-olds being taught on a firing range in Arizona how to fire an Uzi?
I saw that. I couldn't believe that, and I really did have to ask.
We really are Canadians, aren't we?
We really are Canadians. What would be the purpose of that?
That was my question.
Absolutely.
Why would you teach an 8-year-old child how to use it? Uzi.
An Uzi.
An Uzi,
Yeah, really. Unbelievable.
Mind-boggling.
And then we wonder why people get hurt. And why. I'll tell you a quick story, if
Please.
we could.
Yeah.
And people will laugh at me, but it's a story I feel is important to tell. In that we talk about Delta Police being a no-call too small organization,
Yes.
and we talk about that we go to homicides and serious accidents and all those types of things. And I often tell the story about that we had dispatched a couple of our police officers to a noisy frog complaint one night.
Noisy frog complaint.
Noisy
Yes.
frog complaint. Well, and I say, we go to barking dog complaints, noisy frogs, and everybody laughs about that. And I say, what happened with that complaint? And I talked to the officers that were assigned, and they said, we were so mad when we were dispatched to that call. I mean, they said, are you kidding me? Yeah. I joined here to make a
Chase
difference, and I'm going to a noisy frog complaint.
Yeah.
And what they said to me is they knocked on the door of where the complaint came from, and they were met by a gentleman who was terribly, terribly mentally disturbed. And his call out for help was to call the police and say, I've got noisy frogs in my yard, I need help right away. And we talked about that point and saying, you know what, we don't go to the noisy frog complaint. Are we going to be going to a school or to a McDonald's restaurant and be dealing with a terrible, terrible situation? I'll go to the noisy frog complaint any day.
Leaping lizards. We got to take a break.
Yes.
Wonderful story.
Thank you.
We'll be back in a second more with Police Chief Jim Cressford from Delta. Your chance to send us a note to davidberner.com, and also the opportunity for some of our lovely sponsors who support this program to say hello here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Back in a sec. That's a great.
Sorry, I had to tell it.
This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home. Building recovery that works. How safe should you expect to be with your police force? I would think very safe. Our guest is Jim Cressford, who is the Delta Police Chief, and a lot of headlines these days about so many mentally ill and, of course, addicts and so on the streets, and police becoming de facto social workers. You know, they didn't ask for this. No police force asked to do this. We're supposed to be chasing bad guys. But suddenly, bad guys are just folks who have no resources, who have limited resources, emotionally, mentally, financially, familially, and they're suddenly out there. I was having coffee on Commercial Drive the other day. You know, a guy walks by and he's kind of homeless street wreck of a guy, and he begs us for money. We say, no, thanks. No, actually, it was West Broadway. And so he doesn't bother us because we're two big guys. But the next table, he feels a bit more emboldened. So when they refuse, he kicks the table. Then he knocks over a sandwich board and he's yelling and screaming. What are you going to do?
Interesting story, and that's what happens is that, and oftentimes we'll see people with addiction problems, mental health problems. Those are concurrent disorders. There isn't any help for these people. It's like if you have a mental health issue, we can't help you because you've got a drug addiction problem. If you've got a drug addiction problem, we can't help you because you have a mental health issue. And so these people fall through the cracks. What happens is we turn them into criminals. And so what the police often do, because there isn't anywhere else to go, we end up putting these people in jail. And they're going into jail for very short periods of time, maybe 15 to 30 days. And there isn't any treatment being afforded to them. So they come back out in the street and they're every bit in a difficult situation as they were when they went in.
Jim, it's my observation, and you just help me with this. Maybe I'm off on this, but it seemed to me that when I was in my 20s, I'm now in my 70s, that we changed our attitude towards, for example, adolescence. So there was a time when Vancouver police, if they saw a 13-year-old kid at Drake and Granville at 11 at night or 1 in the morning, they'd say, "Excuse me, what's your name?" "Oh, Betty or John. What are you doing here? Where is your family?" And unless it proved that they're somehow, learned or figured out that the family was abusive, it was just a kid having a night. Mm-hmm. So they took most often than not, they drove the kid home. Mm-hmm. But something changed in the way we respond in that situation, and it became impossible. Police were told, you can't do that. Because this kid may be from an abusive home, which may be true, but sometimes not. Have you noticed this change? Have you?
Well, I think what's happening with us is we're getting into, we're really big now, if you will, on looking into root causes of problems. So if we're finding a young person out on the street at 11, 12, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, we try to find out what the reason for that is. And we are actually looking into it a lot more deeply than perhaps we did at other times, but we are going to knock on the door. We are saying to the parents, what's going on here, and is there an issue? And you're right, when you drill down into some of these things, you're finding that there's domestic violence, there's mental health, there's abuse.
But sometimes there isn't. Sometimes it's just a kid.
Sometimes it's just a kid.
Is out on an adventure. Because they're kids. That's what kids do.
That's right. You know what? But I will say this, and I'm often asked about youth and youth issues. And you know what? I have to applaud most parents and give them a pat on the back and say, you know what? There's not that many kids that smoke anymore. Most of our young people are very cognizant of the fact that they can't drink and drive. Older people, perhaps my generation, they haven't caught on to that so well. But the kids seem to have understand it. Within the schools and parenting, they've got a pretty strong message about some of these things are not good. And a credit to them.
Yeah, absolutely. What about coming across addicts on the street? Delta and Surrey are famous for having tons of recovery homes. Unfortunately, about half of them are illegitimate and lunatic and shouldn't be there. But once you put that aside, there's lots of recovery homes. There's lots of places. Does a Delta police officer today, as a matter of course, can a Delta police officer say, "Look, Jack, let's get you up to this recovery house just 5 blocks from here. Let's go talk to these folks"?
Sure.
Really?
We can do that.
Do you do it?
We have a house in Tawasin, Little House.
Little House, yes,
Little House,
wonderful place.
Little House is a great place to, it's not a place where we just drop people off at.
No, but they know everything.
They know everything. They have the resources there. They have the material, and we talk to those people and say, we need to take this person. We need to get this person some help. And we'll look for a recovery house. We have recovery houses in Delta. They are in Surrey as well. We have alcohol rehabilitation centers that we go to, and so they serve they're great places for us. I think the only concern I have with these recovery houses and rehabilitation homes is that they need to be better controlled. The province needs to better control them.
Issue.
You can't just set those up and have it being a fly-by-night operation. There needs to be some structure. There needs to be a framework to how they're dealing with these people. I'm proud to say that Little House does a great job of that. There is a structure, there's a framework there, and they know that.
I think there's a lot of people in the government and in the opposition and people at Surrey City Council, and there's a lot of people in the addictions working world are all striving to clean that up, because we're all pretty annoyed about those places that are rogue places.
Absolutely. Interesting, some of the research that we've talked about just recently with the mental health report that came out yesterday and some of the mental health presentations that we've had, the research has said to us, if you as police chiefs don't stand up and start making mental health a priority, you're going to inherit the whole problem, and it'll be all left up to the police. And what they're saying to us is, start to lobby, start to go to your local, provincial, and federal governments and say, we need help, we need support, and it's got to be a total team effort.
What's the attitude? We just have a few minutes left, but what's the attitude? I'm sure there's as many attitudes as there are police officers. You said, by the way, you have 200?
Yes.
And 100 administrative people, but 200 officers?
That's right.
That's
yes.
fantastic. It's amazing.
Yes, it is.
I didn't realize you had
Yes.
all these people.
We're a medium-sized police department.
Wow. So
they call us. Yeah.
What's the attitude towards addictions in particular and mental health? Do you have some officers who are truly interested, some officers who've gone out of their way to study these issues?
Absolutely. We have 2 full-time mental health officers in the Delta Police Department.
Oh, okay.
That's their sole job,
Okay.
is to focus on mental health.
Yes.
We also have domestic violence officers. Sole
Yes,
responsibility is domestic violence. With the mental health officers,
Is the husband always the bad guy?
I'm sorry?
Is the husband always the bad guy?
No. It's, the numbers would be
That's
more
another-
in favor of the husband being the bad guy for sure. But
yeah.
with the mental health piece of it, our members work with the doctors, they work with the patients, they work with the families, and they do an outstanding job. Some of our police officers in Delta, as an example, this is just our mental health mental health car, if you will, they're carrying 800 to 900 files.
Holy smokes!
It's a lot of
like the Noisy Frog story. Do you have officers who say, "Look, why am I chasing drug addicts and mental health people? I wanted to chase bad guys." Do you have officers who
No,
say,
you know, and you know what? Let
Yeah.
me tell you why, and I should probably be careful how I say this. We've seen what can happen when these people don't get the treatment,
Yeah.
and when they take action into their own lives, and they actually take their life
Yes.
in their own hands.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about with police interaction. I'm talking about sometimes when they commit suicide and some of those violent acts.
Yeah.
Our police officers see that, and I know they say, we got to do what we can do to help these people. They don't take it lightly because they've seen how bad it can
Well,
get.
you can't. Anybody who's seen anything like that.
No,
it's
and these
pretty-
police officers, some of these very, new police officers have seen some really difficult
We've
things.
got a minute left in this program. What should the public be doing to help?
We need the public to support us, and I can't thank you enough for having me on the show, and to have this discussion. And any opportunity that we can get, we need to talk to the public. We need your support, and we're trying to do the best that we can, but we need you to be behind us. And you got to talk to your local politicians, your MLAs and MPs.
I saw a beautiful thing the other day at a Safeway store where a guy who seemed to be, whatever, a mental patient, whatever, and this Safeway people subdued him, and unfortunately some of the shoppers were laughing, thinking that there was something funny about this. It wasn't funny at all, it was sad, but I got to compliment those Safeway guys. They just subdued the guy, they didn't hurt him and so on. They did very well.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the recommendations that came out of this report was the stigma. We need to destigmatize.
Destigmatized, yeah.
And there's a classic example. Thank you.
Jim, wonderful to have you
Thank
here.
you. Thanks to
Jim Cressford, Delta Police Chief, and we've announced several weeks in a row, I think, that next week our guest will be Karen Medeiros, the Executive Director of the Adopted Families Association. We keep juggling her appearance, but she really will be here next week. Thank you. I hope you will be with us here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Good night.
Yeah, that's great.